Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Minnesota Mike back with you for another video. This is another one in the vlog series that I do for the Memphis Songwriters Association. And, this is all about songwriting, what it takes to write a hit, and what it takes to write a non hit, but that, you still use some of those same strategies. So, thus far, we've talked about just that. You don't have to write a hit to write a hit, and also talked about character development in songs, whether they were hits or not. And a hit for these purposes were, I'm defining that as it charted in the top 20 or higher, top 20 or higher in Billboard. Um, so, 20 or higher, I should say. And so that's how we are defining a hit. And we're going to take a little bit of a break from You Don't Have to Write a Hit to Write a Hit to talk about some hits that were 20 or higher on the Billboard charts. Now, for some context, I actually learned this while researching this blog that the Billboard chart took its current name in 1967. So, in this blog, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss the number one single from the first week in January through 6 consecutive decades, which is 1967 when it started through 2017. I cannot predict the exact song that's going to be the number one single in 2027, but using some of these strategies, we can probably guess, maybe a little bit what it's going to sound like. Although there's definitely been some, shifts in melody and style and all of that. There are still some certain things that people have used over the years, and that's kind of what I want to focus on. As I have mentioned, this is a blog that I do through the Memphis Songwriters Association. And before we dive in, I want to give a shout out to our former president, Andrew Cabigo, for giving me this idea of, breaking down hit songs. Even though I like to tip you guys off to ones that are still great but weren't necessarily a hit, given the way that we're defining it. But we'll start off in 1967. This was the week of January 7th of 1967. And this particular song was number one for that particular week until February 11th of that same year. So 6 weeks at number one, and I'm a Believer by the Monkees, and it was knocked off by Kind of a Drag by the Buckinghams, which the Monkees probably thought was kind of a drag. So, like many of the hits of the 60s and the early days of rock and roll, so, 50s and 60s, there's a simple, relatable story setup. The verses quickly express that the narrator is frustrated and growing frustrated, trying to find love. It establishes the credibility that he's not some snob, he's not, like this really good looking guy or whatever, although some people might disagree with that in reality. Um, so he's not some snob who forgot what it's like to struggle finding love. Uh, and establishes that, right? That, like, hey, I'm just like you. And so that kind of establishes that, like, okay, I want to listen to this person because if he can find love, so can I. So that's a very relatable thing. So he says, okay, it talks about his frustrations trying to find love. Um, and there's some cynicism there, right? But then it quickly transitions into the chorus saying no more of that cynicism. The chord changes in the love was out to get me, and what's the use in trying sections. Pre-choruses more or less, but the verses are super short, so it might actually be part of the verse. But anyway, they're so quick from that first part that I thought love was only true in fairy tales into that kind of pre-chorusy feel. It's so short, and you're forced to pay attention to the progression of the narrator's feelings immediately. And if you don't, you're going to miss his happiness and continue to be cynical yourself. So that's one thing that worked really, really well in that, and probably why that was a big hit. Obviously, there are other things that play into it. It's very catchy, all of that stuff, but lyrically, it's very, very relatable. So I do want to say, normally at this point, I'd say, "Hey, see you next time," but this particular video lends itself a lot better to looking at all these songs in one kind of cohesive unit, so that you don't have to sift through and you can kind of see the comparisons in the same video. So now we're going to transition to 10 years later, in 1977. And this is the song "You Don't Have to Be a Star to Be in My Show" by Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr. So this is the number one. This was the number one for the week of January 8th. That's technically the second week in January. And it was knocked off by Leo Sayers' "You Make Me Feel Like Dancing" on January 15th. So this one was number one for a slightly shorter time. So if rock and roll showed off true musicianship, disco got a reputation for kind of the cheapening of those instrumentals, as well as the lyrical messages, placing more emphasis on being able to dance to the tune rather than being introspective. But 10 years after "I'm a Believer" hit the top spot, we can still at least see one similarity between the two messages. You don't have to be anything special in order to find love. And that's what makes it so relatable. The only thing this song did differently than "I'm a Believer" is use the metaphor of a star, as in an actor, instead of a character in a fairy tale. But generally speaking, it said, "Hey, again, you don't really have to be anything special to be special," essentially. Um, so that's what made that work. Now, the one that went to number one in 1987 was "Walk Like an Egyptian" by the Bangles. And I knew immediately when I saw this that this was going to take, speaking of introspection, going to take a lot of introspection on my end. And how in the heck was I going to compare the Monkees to that "You Don't Have to Be a Star to Be in My Show"? Um, it's ridiculous to kind of do that. And so what I ended up doing was I did a little bit of thinking on my own, and then a little later on, what I did was I took a look at that and actually did some research on "Walk Like an Egyptian," and the results were pretty much the same. That there were a couple more things in there that drew similarities between this and the other songs that I talked about. So, like I said, on the surface, you know, they don't have that much in common. So, when I took a second listen to the song that I've heard numerous times before, it hit me. This song is a bit of escapism. So the narrator is talking about all the strange people that she sees around town, and even though there are all kinds of different people that she's seeing, it goes back to one singular commonality. And although these people have completely different lives, there's one thing that unites them all. They're all walking like Egyptians. So in the first two songs, they're looking for love, and all they have to do is be themselves. But in this song, they don't want to be themselves, because being themselves means standing out, and you want to be the same. Being able to go to a donut shop, being in school, in a restaurant, whatever, and being able to walk like an Egyptian, it provides some common escape that everybody needs to go back to. Uh, Basically, what they were doing before. So before they go back to what they were doing before, they're like, "Oh, hey, this person's just like me." And so you find that community that way. So, like I said, all of what I mentioned was my interpretation of the song with no research as to what actually inspired it. The actual inspiration came from a ferry trip across the English Channel with choppy waters. So the waters were raging and all the passengers tiptoed around, and the writer, whose name was Liam Sternberg, noticed that all the people on the ferry were all walking like Egyptians. So, true to the common theme that's indeed struggling with life, but it's more like everyone literally being in the same boat, trying to survive. So you don't have to be a star to be worthy of love. You don't have to be a star to be in danger of sinking on a ferry either. So that's one of those things that no matter where they were on a ferry or in the donut shop or whatever, they were all walking like Egyptians and they were all in the same boat for that one moment in time. So that's a really, really special thing. So now we're going to shift gears into the 90s with Unbreak My Heart by Toni Braxton. So this particular song, it was actually number one for 7 weeks, so even more than I'm a Believer, from January 4th, 1997 until February 22nd of 1997. And it was unseated by the one and only Wannabe by the Spice Girls, which might not be worth breaking down. But this song is built entirely on the vulnerability of wanting someone who lets you down. It's not actually just about wanting them, but needing them to come and heal you, even though they were the one who hurt you, which is a really interesting concept for a song. So the Billboard charts would contain everything from bubblegum pop, which was Wannabe by the Spice Girls, um, bubblegum pop, other emotionally driven songs, things like that, at number one throughout the year. Unbreak My Heart caught hold because of its universal message and a melody that's perfect for crying your eyes out. So that was 1997. Now we shift gears into 2007. January 6th, specifically, of 2007, and another song that was number one for 7 weeks until February 24th of 2007. It was unseated by Say It Right by Nelly Furtado. So Irreplaceable by Beyonce, that's the song. And honestly, if you thought that comparing the Monkees to the Bangles was difficult, let's think about comparing Unbreak My Heart to Irreplaceable. That's even harder. So I'm not going to even try, not going to even take a shot at it. In fact, Irreplaceable to me was a hit for the exact opposite reason of Unbreak My Heart. By 2007, listeners were ready to hear about a man who broke a woman's heart, and the woman doesn't want him to come crawling back. It also builds in a way that we're not used to pop songs building in. And going back to the Monkees, one of the things that made it work again was how quickly it dove into the point of the song. But this song starts off with the iconic line, the to the left, and you're kind of wondering what she means because it's just that. She doesn't dive into any detail. It's just to the left, to the left. Is this another cha-cha slide? You're teaching me how to do a dance as the music plays? Nope, absolutely not. Everything her ex owns is in a box to the left. She's kicking him to the curb, insisting I can find another you in a minute, before finally concluding, don't think you're irreplaceable. There's a structural note that I want to talk about here too. Like I said, it builds in a way that a pop song doesn't always build. It kind of has a pre-chorus that comes in later, and so it just kind of adds with the things. So if you want a pop song from the early 2000s that doesn't sound like it was written for a boy band or a girl group, and I'm not bashing them, Beyonce was part of a girl group, this is a fabulous one to check out. There are a lot of rhythm changes, the memorable lines, and they don't just appear in the chorus. It's just a really brilliantly written song. So you have the to the left, everything you own is in a box to the left. And then the pre-chorusy part says, you must not know about me, you must not know about me. And then it dives in a little bit later into I could find another you in a minute, so don't think for a minute you're irreplaceable. And it's just a really, really cool song. If you listen to how it was structured, it's a good way to, look at a pop song and say, hey, this doesn't have to follow this cookie cutter method of writing. It, can be something special structurally, lyrically, all of that good stuff. So I'm sure that's another reason why it went number one, in addition to the lyrical content. So now we're going to dive into 2017, which is the last of the decade look at the Billboard number one. And this is Starboy by The Weeknd featuring Daft Punk. So, similar to Irreplaceable, Starboy is all about being better off with your current lifestyle than your prior one. There are twinges of talking to somebody about how tiny their house is. They need a centerpiece, is kind of what they're saying, or literally what they're saying. And it may or may not be an axe, but it certainly is someone who's done the person wrong and they want to brag to that person. So, without comparing it to anything, rap music tends to flock toward showing off once you've gotten out of that struggle, right? If it's not talking about the struggle itself, then it's talking about, hey, I got out of here. And sometimes it does both. So the thing that gives rap its enduring power is that it's not inherently about a racial struggle, but it's more about an economic one. And The Weeknd isn't just successful in this song; he's a star boy. And I'm cutting out the profanity, but listen and you'll see his line is a little bit better than that. So it's something maybe not everyone can relate to, being a star boy, but something almost everyone has aspired to be at some point in their life. Not mentioned in this chart run, but it's also the same reason why Travelin' Band by Creedence Clearwater Revival is so successful and was so successful. It's the same reason why it works to make a car commercial imply that your life will be a million times better if you buy that particular vehicle. You might not be able to relate to it firsthand like you can with the first two songs, but you can relate to the struggle to get there and not feel bad for the person when he gets there, no matter how he does. So that's a really interesting look at the Billboard chart over the past 60 years, and taking a look at number ones from 1967 to 2017, skipping a decade each time. The songs may seem different, but there are certain things certain themes that you can write about, certain structures that you can use that still talk about relatable things, so you don't have to sell out or write anything that you don't want to write about to write a hit. And don't just take it from me. Dan Wilson, who's one of my favorite songwriters, wrote for Semisonic and a lot of other artists, said that exact same thing pretty recently. And so even though he has had a lot of hits, that's just one of those things that he knows that sometimes writing is just for the sake of writing. And if you're good enough at it, if you get lucky enough, you can hit number one by using some of these strategies, and don't have to sell out, quote unquote, in order to get that hit. But these are some of the hits from the past 60 years, and I hope it's helpful in your songwriting. I'm Minnesota Mike. Be sure to check out this blog on the Memphis Songwriters Association website, and all of my other vlogs are on my YouTube page. I'm also on Spotify and iTunes, all your favorite streaming platforms, Instagram, Facebook, social media wise. Thank you so much.